Now, can I set my level, please? Can you all hear me? Good. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the meeting of the Development Committee. There are no fire drills planned for this evening. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the nearest exit and make your way to the assembly point located in the market car park adjacent to the Civic Suite building. Please be reminded to switch off your mobile phone and turn any other electronic device being used to silent. Please note that the meeting will be live streamed where the proceedings are capable of repeated viewing. I would like to make members aware that while the presentation by officers is being shown, this will be the image that will be seen by the public on the live stream. Please ensure your microphone is switched on when speaking and you speak clearly into the microphone. If you're seated in the public area of the chamber, it is likely that your image will be captured by the recording cameras and result in your image becoming part of the broadcast. If members are for any reason not present for the whole debate on an item, you should consider and seek advice as necessary on whether it would be appropriate for you to vote on that item. Item 1, apologies for absences and substitute. Members' apologies received from Councillor O'Leary, Councillor Page, Councillor Squires-Coleman, Councillor Mrs Shaw, who will be substituted by Councillor FD, and Councillor Mr Shaw, who will be substituted by Councillor Steptoe. Item 2, non-members attending, Councillor Williams. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of February 2024. Are these minutes agreed, members? Agreed. Sorry, I've moved forward. November 24. Agreed, members? Item 4, to receive declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Chair. Item 6, I believe it would be under an ORI in that I have a factory on the site, but I would point out that as I am coming to a natural end of my career, that it has no financial interest, gain or loss for this application. As such, I would ask that I could stay in the room, but I will not take part in the debate, neither will I vote. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chair. There has been a report in the Echo newspaper of a comment that I made that is neither predetermined termination or at this committee, but it's just to say that there is that item there, and my statement was that it's nice to have the buildings, house buildings that are being made for residents in the locality. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. You sought advice on that?
Yes, advice has been given to me by Paul Birkinshaw. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Steptoe.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'm County Council, member of Essex County Council for all 3 items, but particularly with item 5, I'm also the ward councillor.
Thank you. Any other declarations, Councillor FD?
Rochford Parish Council.
Is that all the declarations? Thank you, members.
Before we start the meeting, can I ask for some clarification for the officers on the addendum that came out for the development, please?
Yes, you certainly can. It's a question I asked myself.
Right. we've got this appendum about the updated national planning policy framework, but I didn't think that was coming in for another 3 months because it hasn't gone through government or it's not part of the bill. Is this an adjustment to the existing framework, or is this from the new framework? Because I didn't think the new one has gone through yet.
Chair, if we're talking of the National Planning Policy Framework, I know there's other papers out there that are consultations, etc. But the National Planning Policy Framework, the NPPF, was issued and published, I think it was Thursday last week. So it had been expected for some time, I think since the election in the summer. But it finally got published and issued to us as planning authorities last Thursday. So it's in effect. And of course, the reports that you have before you now were written before that publishing event, before that came into effect. So what we've had to do is have a rush through them, see if it changes anything, and update you on this addendum as to the consequences, which I think in all cases, apart from a bit of grey belt on item 6, it makes no change, hence the advice that we've given you. But it's been published, we're working to it now, and you're working to it tonight.
It was just my understanding from what I've read in the papers that it wasn't coming in for another 3 months because it had to go through government. So I just really want to clarify whether we're working to what is coming in or we're working to what is already adjusted.
Thank you, Councillor Constable.
Planning officer, yeah. Chair, I've just been told in my ear, because I was off a couple of days last week and haven't read it in full yet, it's the plan-making part of the NPPF that is the delay you're referring to. So if you're making local plans and things like this, that kicks in later. But the development management side, the dealing with planning applications like we're doing tonight, that is in effect.
Thank you. Item 5, items referred from the weekly list. There is one item referred from the weekly list. (24-00272) Full land adjacent to 9 College Gardens, Rochford. Before Mr. Stranks presents the report, I would just like to say we have actually had a site visit now on this particular site. This is the 3rd time that this has actually come to this committee. I'd just like to remind members to be mindful of we are making decisions on planning matters. We have been to the site and we've got to make sure that we do this 100% right for all people's concerned. Mike Stranks will now present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is to a site between, we haven't got the screens as yet, with difficulty, Chair, because the desk is very wide and I've not got a long neck.
Can you hold on one sec, please, Mr. Stranks? Kate E. Do apologise, members. I think we do need to get this sorted out first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application is to a site between a detached bungalow at number 32 Roachway. If we can indicate that with the cursor, I'll be grateful, please. And a detached house at number 9 College Gardens. The house and its adjoining development of some 14 dwellings to the east of the site was formerly part of the Roachway Adult College, formerly a sort of secondary school in an earlier life, that was redeveloped. It's only part at the moment. There's the housing put in, but there's plans approved for a care home on the vacant land to the east of the estate road that you can see there. This application was deferred at the previous meeting to allow members to visit the site, as the Chair alluded to. At the site visit, members expressed concern at the overlooking potential of the front balcony detail, and the agent who was present giving us access felt that this feature could be deleted as it was a feature largely to repeat the design which we'll show you of the neighbouring properties, and the applicant has now revised the plans. Before we go through all the details, if we can look at 12 plan, please, this should show you the existing floor plan, and if you look where the extension, the first floor upper extension, that looks like the revised one. If we could look at the that's it. That was the plan you had before you last time. And can you see the bedroom on, that's it there. There's a balconette recessed into the walling of the proposed house. If we can now look at the 12 plan revised, you'll see that what the applicant has done, they've put a sloped roof instead of the balcony. They haven't enlarged the bedroom. They've just deleted that balcony detail and put a sloped roof. And if we can jump to the 8 plan elevations, please. I'm going to show you, no, existing. I'm going to show you on the existing plan, and if you can zoom into that flank elevation, I think it's the next one down, where you can see the solar panels, that's it. Now that's the proposed, yeah. We'll come back to that, but if the next one down there, if you can zoom right in on that elevation, you might just be able to see ghosting through the recess in the balcony. I can just see it, but I know where I'm looking. That's it. If members can focus their eye on that detail, that's the side flank walls that came out past the balcony to secure privacy, yeah? And if you can see that line, now if we can jump to the proposed plan, you'll see what the agent has done is trim back that walling. So not only has he taken the balcony out, he's taken the sort of bluff walls that went out sideways, so he's reduced the depth of that upper floor extension. So the rooms are all the same sizes as reported to you, but the agent hasn't taken the opportunity he might have done to extend the bedroom. Instead he's cut it back in terms of building mass. Officers consider that these changes, at the time we was at site visit, we was fearful we might have to reconsult, but as they're a reduction in overall mass, officers feel that there's no need to further do reconsultations in light of that change. Now, we'll run through what we did previously. Members will recall, if we look at 1A, the allocations map, please. Members will recall that the site was actually technically in the green belt. And as I said about the redevelopment of the school site, it's probably on there somewhere, but being in the green belt would mean that new houses are inappropriate. But that's it, that's good. You'll see the site is the vacant bit between that's where the cursor is now, if you can see it. But just to show you that it is technically part of a wider green belt, but with the redevelopment of the school for residential purposes that you've seen on earlier plans and images, the green belt there no longer serves any function. That didn't affect our recommendation to you before, but now in the light of the NPPF, you'll see on the addendum that the government has introduced a term of grey belt where they talk about the performance of that particular greenbelt site in containing urban sprawl. And as you've got new development further to the east, that site makes no sense in being retained as greenbelt. So that would become your first test of grey-belt to this committee, even though we were recommending to you to approve on the basis of older policies in the NPPF. If we can look at 2 plan, disability access plan, disability Essex plan, this site functioned actually with what is now Trustlinks. At the time it was Disability Essex, and they had an access over this plot of land that you're looking at tonight that gave them the access to their site from the car park that was to the front of the building, the former playground areas of the school. If we can jump to now I've got me. Yeah, I was looking for the car park. That's it, that's good. You'll see now, because the site is surrounded by housing development, Trustlinks gets an access to the front of your site before you tonight, but off the cul-de-sac of houses that we met when we had the site visit. So this former access required for the Trustlinks building as it is now redundant. It's not required, it's fenced off, I think it's been sold. So the Trustlinks get their access from a proper cul-de-sac with the adjoining housing. The members will recall, if we can look at the photographs quickly, there you'll see the designs of the buildings next door. You'll note the mesh gating and fencing that we saw on the site visit. If we could jump through the next ones. You'll see that the building proposed generally follows the design principles of the 14 houses that are part of the new development. If we can carry on. That's round the back of the site. That's the properties that back onto it, but they're more or less each identical, subject to material changes. If we carry on. And there is the site. You'll see it's now fenced, and there's a land level in there that's from the old legacy of the way the land was developed. In our recommendation previously and before you tonight, we're recommending that in addition to the conditions that you've got before you, that an additional condition, if you're minded to approve it, be for the submission of levels and details surrounding the development there, where they take the soil down to the level of College Gardens. We think there should be details submitted for the council to consider between the existing levels as they are now and the finished levels of the site. If we can look at the next plans, please. Just the elevations in total, just to, there you see that's the old one, yeah. But you'll see generally that that's okay, that's good. You'll see the principles and the appearance of the building replicates College Gardens. That's good architecture. Now, if we go back to the site plan proposed, I don't know which plan that is. Sorry, Chairman, I haven't. Yeah. Okay. I'll try, Chair. Yeah, no, that's okay. If we can, that is the proposed elevation, so we can, that's it. If we can stay on that, please. You'll see from the report that there's an error, that the garden area is actually only 6 square metres short, not 12, as we previously presented to you. That was because the case officer didn't measure the patio where the patio doors go out. So you might have got the impression that there was a sort of a 10% shortfall in garden area, but it's half that, because the patio where the patio doors open out onto, they are counted in your garden area calculations. The case officer had admitted that. So there's a shortfall of 6 square metres, so 94 square metres garden area as opposed to the 88 that you was told previously in the report. And if you look to the sort of left-hand side of your screen, you'll see that the 2-storey element has a side space of some 1.9 metres. You only need, for policy compliance, 1 metre like you've got on the other side adjoining College Gardens. But in this case, there's a greater side isolation space. We saw on site the access point where you see it sort of goes around the corner of the cul-de-sac. We saw that the curbing to the adjoining neighbour, although they've kindly landscaped it with bark and chippings to keep it tidy, you'll see that the applicant controls that part of the site that's currently being sort of looked after by the adjoining neighbour, but it isn't within their ownership, we understand. So there is adequate width there to get one vehicle into the site and park as the architect is showing. So the recommendation, Chair, is one of approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report, plus with the addition of the revised plans that you're now looking at in the condition that lists the plans, and a condition 10 requiring finished, existing and finished site levels.
Thank you, Mike. We have one public speaker for this item. Mr. Perkin will speak in objection to the application. Mr. Perkins, if you'd like to. Are you au fait with the equipment and how to turn it on and off?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, won't be a second, Mr. Perkin. Members, are we all okay? Mr. Perkins, you have 5 minutes to make your speech.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nigel Perkin and I live at number 32 Roach Way, which is the bungalow adjacently west of the proposed site, 9A College Gardens. Thank you for the site visit on Saturday, on the 14th of December. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to speak. Otherwise, I would have recommended that the physical measurements of the site were taken, as there are some discrepancies of the plot size, as mentioned in my reference item 15 in my email to you all. sent early in November. For example, it states the site would have a width of 11.5 metres measured from the front wall of the dwelling, where the front wall of the dwelling would be sited. However, this measures 10.3 metres from boundary to boundary, allowing 1 metre from the boundary of number 9 and the 1.9 metres recommended from us. That leaves an available dwelling width of 7.4 metres. And the plans show a property of 9.25 metres. It just won't fit. I took the opportunity to place boards on the fence showing where the property would start and finish. It clearly showed that it would be completely block out dining room window. Not potentially, as stated in your items 23 and 24, but definitely. The proposed dwelling has 3 front windows, plus a balcony, but obviously that's been rectified, all allowing overlooking into our garden, and maybe more importantly, truss links, who have vulnerable children and adults using the facilities in their garden and recreational areas. The driveway into 9A could also cause danger and hazard to them as they enter and leave truss links. Another concern is the excavation required to bring it down to the same level as number 9. This would mean taking down to nearly a metre. I'm no civil engineer, but surely this would alter the integrity of the fencing to the south, truss links, and to the east, us, in number 32. But more importantly, the foundations to the bungalow and to the garage, whose back wall acts as the boundary to the rear garden of the dwelling. This was noted by 1 or 2 of the councillors during the site visit. Can I have picture 1, please, Katie? This shows the property as it used to look when the school was there. If you look at the original picture of our bungalow, number 32, you will see the original boundaries of the school, college, and the portion of green belt immediately to the east and the south, and are not part of college gardens and remain green belt. Truss Links was built on green belt, maybe because it is an eco building serving mental health learning facility, I don't really know. But the land to the east became a driveway serving Truss Links, but is still very much green belt. Picture number 2, please, Katie. Right, this shows a Google Earth image of the site and how, no, sorry, number 2, sorry. Picture 2 is the new builds with the 14 properties of College Gardens, which have already made this area overdeveloped, in my opinion. Picture 3, please, Katie. This is a Google Earth image of the site and how a reversed replica, or a mirror image if you like, of number 9, which is the proposed, would not fit. You will also note that the fence boundary to the east, of number 9, angles in before you get to the rear of the property, making this much less than a metre. Also, garden size, item 29 on your list. The garden is under the recommended size, but allowing for the large open space to the west makes this acceptable. Where is this large open space? There seems to be issues of size throughout this planning application, but it seems to be overlooked just to squeeze this property in, which won't fit anyway. It would be selfish of me not to mention also the concerns of the properties to the north of the site, in particular number 3, 4 and 5, who would be affected by the proposed dwelling, causing overshadowing and privacy, and also fencing issues when they excavate the site. I know this is an emotional appeal as well as being constructive, but please consider the what if. What if you lived in number 32? And what if you had vulnerable friends or family using the Truss Links facility? Would you support this application? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Mr. Stranks, would you be able to answer some of those? In particular, the sizes which we're talking about.
Yes, Chair. I was just looking.
Sorry, could you?
Yeah, I was just looking through my presentation. I agree that the dimension in the report was overstated, but I'm looking at my figure. But I haven't measured the site. I'm only going from the plans, and I think I was about a half a metre reduction. But even by the speakers, here we go. I'm not sure it does now. But even at your minimum plot frontage is 9.25 metres. Okay, so this is a big enough plot and some, even by the speaker's own sizes. I think he said 10.25. I think measuring from the plans, I made it, I think 11.25. So there was, say, a half a metre difference between me and the architect from his own plans. But I think the important point is this is a developable plot, okay? Because it's 10.25, it's a metre wider than the minimum you require for development like this. And I think if we go back to the images from the speaker, please, the aerial view, we often speak to you about what we call indicative plans, okay? Now this is very useful to show you the degree of fit. Now on the point at the back where the fence line tapers, that happens from time to time in places. What's important is the isolation, the gap to the street scene, okay? Because as a council, you're dealing with the public side of things, not the private side. And there's many an extension or new dwelling even where you get a pinch point at the back. We refuse it where it's at the front because it impacts the public domain, the street. But on the back, they're normally tolerated. So what you have a repeat of the dwelling form. Now what you just have to bear in mind is that the way this has been done, it usefully shows the car parking area and that to the front. But because of the way the image is one of these like bird's eye views, you've got to think of the plan that you've got where it shows there will be a metre gap. At the moment, that image looks like the side walls, even on the existing neighbouring plot of number 9, come down and sort of like kiss the boundary. But that's because of the photography, in order to try and show it. But I'm just be mindful to members that where you see the side extension at 2-storey level, the flat roofed bit adjoining the bungalow, it looks like it's literally inches away from the neighbouring bungalow. When you'll see, regardless of the plot width, whether it's 11.25 or 10.25, there will be a metre gap on that side. So you've got room to play with on the site of number 32, on the side of there, whatever the discrepancy. But if you rely on that image, you've got to bear in mind that that seems to show that everything is squeezed in by the way that the photographs are taken, something they call bird's eye. So I'll just bear that in mind. That wasn't part of the submissions, but if you rely on that, you could be undermined by the plans. The question is the width across the site, where the building sits, where the sort of porch detail, where the bins are. The speaker was saying that's 10.25, which is more than your minimum plot width. Officers are saying that's 11.25, so that we're a metre out between us somehow. But I haven't got the advantage that I've measured the site. In terms of the green belt argument, it's a matter for members if they say, well, look, you know, it's inappropriate development. You'll see from the new MPPF that not only was it previously developed land before with the college, so without the new MPPF, we were recommending approval to you. But under this new MPPF, there's a new term called grey belt, where if the green belt doesn't serve a purpose of preventing urban sprawl, what this site actually becomes now, because of the new development, is infilling. Okay, so I couldn't agree with the speaker to say it's a valuable, important part of green belt. Yes, it's green belt technically, but it doesn't form part of a resistance to sprawl because it's leapfrogged this site and is now the College Gardens development. The large open spaces that, I don't know if we can see from the aerial image, members will recall, I don't think, yeah, that's good. You'll see that the green area, which is the playing field to the former school, that's nearby. And then there's the sort of Millview Meadows sort of informal open space. Some people call it Teletubby land because of the mounds and the planting. You've got two areas. You've got a formal space that can be used for games, which is the school playing field. And then you've got the informal walk area right next door through the hedge. Now, your guidance says that where a development is near to or adjoins public open space, the residents in these houses could take advantage of that, and therefore you don't have to be so rigid on the amount of amenity space that you need. And to take that as well, the space that's being offered here with the layout is a usable space. It's not like you see on some flat schemes when they have 10 square metres over there behind the car park and 30 square metres over there, and it's all fragmented. It is one usable space. So officers don't feel that the shortfall in garden area, which works out at 6 square metres, is a significant enough failing that would justify refusing the permission. I think, Chair, that's covered it.
Thank you. Order of speakers, ward members to take priority. Roach South Ward is Councillors Marriott, Steptoe and Williams. Visiting members wish to speak. Councillor Williams, would you like to come down? No, that's fine. No, that's fine there.
Thank you very much. Chairman, members, firstly, I would like to thank you for taking the time to attend the site meeting last Saturday. I sincerely trust that, that this made clear to you the issues that I have with this application. I have no intention of going over my last address to this committee, other than to say the issue is not with the development of this site, but that any development does need to be appropriate, not just for the present street scene and access, but mostly for existing neighbouring properties. The scale of this development and potential for overlooking can only be, in my view, to the detriment of adjoining properties, our residents, making this application totally inappropriate for this site. Members, I'd like to thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any committee members who wish to speak? Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Chair. A number of things, really. The boundary treatment, one of the things that was useful about having the site visit was to note the amount of drop that there will have to be to the boundary to the bungalow, and that there will be a need for retaining wall or a retaining structure of some sort for the fencing there. Bearing in mind the discrepancy that we have found or has been pointed out to us with regards to the actual drawing and the physical side on the site, what would take precedence? Would that be the dimension of the boundary to the building or the building size? I think that is quite important, because if you do end up having to have retaining wall there, although you've suggested that there is enough room there, once the retaining wall is put in there, you'll be well under a metre if that measurement is wrong. So the pathway down the side there would end up being quite narrow. That's the first point. The overlooking is something that members were very concerned about with when we did the site visit, and I do wonder if there are special circumstances under planning where we do have something like the facility next door there, that where you have vulnerable people there, if that is actually a situation which can be a material consideration. I'd like a little clarification on that, please. Should members be minded to approve this application, the road that leads onto the site would be likely to get some pretty hefty use. I'd like to see a condition survey in place before the building, and one affected afterwards, so as there is a responsibility on the developer to actually bring that back to spec should there be any damage. Having been there on Saturday, I think one of the things that struck all of us was the parking situation around there. It was quite dire. Now, I know that there was football practice and matches going on at the time there, but this is a thing that is going to be happening throughout the actual development. Is there any way that we can actually request that the building is not started until the parking situation that is on the site plan is completed? Garden size, we are under garden size, as you've already suggested, and the effect of the mismeasurement that appears to become apparent, that will reduce it even further if that is the case. And would that affect your recommendation if you do then lose further garden size to what we are supposed to be approving? That's it for now. Thank you.
Mr. Stranks.
Thank you, Chairman. The boundary treatment in relation to the retaining wall, your 1 metre side space is to keep apart buildings, to avoid terracing or what we call coalescence in a broader term. So it's not to provide a nice access to the garden to take all the refuse out rather than taking it through the house or the back of the garage or somewhere. It's to keep blocks of buildings apart. Now, the retaining wall would only need to be to the lower part. So I doubt the retaining wall would need to go up as high as the fence line, interfering with the physical development. So we hope to cover that with the condition about levels. If members wanted to, if they're minded to approve it, to add to that condition to seek the retaining wall details, etc., then that can be incorporated in. But you can build over retaining walls. You can provide pathway access, because more often than not the retaining walls are subterranean, unless they're made into sort of flower bed features or something like that. But I wouldn't say from a planning point of view that the retaining wall undermines your 1 metre side space, unless you had such a severe slope that the retaining wall was like having a house next door or a bungalow. So I don't think that would be the problem that we might otherwise think. When you say, oh, that's covered that, the overlooking and the very special circumstances, that is a matter for members, okay? You have to look at each case on its merits and the factors to be taken into account. And we saw on site Saturday that the front boundary treatment to Truss Links is open mesh, so you can already look into it. We saw neighbouring properties that had balconies and window details to varying degrees overlooking the site. We saw that the Truss Links people use the edges around their car park for allotments, growing vegetables and that, as well as a more central area where they sit out perhaps in better weather. So they make use to varying degrees of the frontage area. But those gates, more often than not, I think the manager of the site said during the day, they are kept open. We have a photograph, I think, somewhere that shows that. So I don't think we're talking of a secure unit of any sort. That it is currently viewed, it would be for members as to whether they felt that the extra building that you're being asked to consider tonight was so damaging over and above the kind of environment that people already experience there. Now, with the road use, yes, you could put a condition on that requires a pre-condition survey and a post-decision survey, and the applicant would have to submit that and agree that. With the parking, I don't see that there's a parking conflict. I don't know if we can go back to the site location plan. Sorry, the one that shows the car parking area. You'll see that there's a large area in the front, that'll do, where you can not only park a couple of vehicles, but you can get visitors in. But that building to the left is actually a garage. We're not counting that as an official car parking space because it hasn't got the 7 metres depth that it requires. It's nearly 6.
Mr. Stranks, 1 second, please. Councillor Eaves, when you said parking, were you referring to on the road or on the building?
I'm more concerned about the construction traffic during the time of actually the build. I can see that there won't be an issue once it's developed, but there are going to be some pretty hefty vehicles coming down there on a regular basis, and that is very tight parking down that road.
Yeah, well, there's no planning powers to stop anybody from dropping off materials and the like to serve the site. When people have domestic extensions in streets and things, it happens all the time. But what normally is the case, that they bring the material into the site, if for no other reason, to make it secure, to stop theft and stuff. So you'll more often than not get all your materials brought to the site. There may be concrete deliveries where they're piped through, and the lorry, while it delivers its load, is parked in the street for however many minutes that takes. But your site operatives, carpenters, builders, brickies, people like that, they will have to park in the vicinity, and they'll have to bear in mind that they're not meant to block drive-ins and things. But the deliveries of bricks and building materials from time to time will park, will drop their loads, and they will block for that period of time the access to Truss Links and the neighbouring houses. But that is usually temporary, and there's nothing in planning that can stop that. That was that. Garden size, as I say, I can't help you with the actual dimension physically. The neighbour has measured it. I've only been able to go from the plans. But if you did find it was shorter, you've got the same judgment to bring that it's adjoining two areas of open space, different types of open space, one just a grass field, the other an informal, pleasant walking area. And your guidance says that as a committee, you can choose to lower your standard where the future residents have that access to that facility. What's the decision for yourselves is whether the shortfall of 6 metres that officers have concluded, or whether that it is more, is still enough for those occupiers to have a enjoyment of their home, have reasonable outside recreation, places to store bikes and things like that, washing lines perhaps, pets if they're in hutches and that. Is that garden area going to be big enough for the reasonable expectations of those future occupiers? So if the plans are wrong in terms of the overall plot size, there may be a further reduction, but that may be mitigated by people can go, if say one of the child in the house has friends around, they want to go and play ball or something, they've got a nice open space just at the bottom of the street where they can do that. If another resident wants to go for a walk, working from home, stretch their legs, they've got a nice informal open space nearby as well. So your standard allows you to take all that into account. That's the decision before you tonight. One other thing that was raised earlier that I missed about the foundations and the garage being undermined and the adjoining bungalow, that's not in the Planning Act. There is a separate piece of legislation called the Party Wall Etc. Act 1996. And what that requires is different owners either side of a boundary to enter into discussion between surveyors, and if they can't agree, they end up appointing a third surveyor to act as mediator, whereby that legislation requires that owner doing the work to make sure they do not undermine the structures of the neighbouring properties. That would apply to number 9 College Gardens as well as the bungalow at number 32 Roachway. That is not in the planning legislation. That's outside that. When you do development, you need building regs, you need perhaps party wall, you need planning permission, you may need fire certificates, all of these other things. The Party Wall Act is another piece of legislation that builders and people doing extensions and stuff have to comply with. It's not in the planning legislation. It's not something you rule on or give a decision on. I understand the concern, but the developer should be engaging with the adjoining people where he's likely to affect the conditions of slope and structure into a Party Wall Act agreement. And that agent, I think you recall on the site, started to talk about those things when we met him on site, but we didn't continue with that because obviously that's not the sort of thing you start talking about at a site visit. I think that's covered the questions asked, Chair.
Councillor Eaves.
There was just one that hasn't been answered. Because of the possible site discrepancy in dimensions, what takes precedence? Does it the gap on either side as drawn on the drawings, or would it be the actual building? Because if there is a metre difference, then I think that's quite important. And if that is something that is material, then I would suggest that we would insist on the gaps either side of the building being the litmus test.
Chairman, as long as there was a metre gap at first floor level to both boundaries when the development was finished, that would be the significant thing. So you're looking for a gap at upstairs level of 1 metre between the building and the plot boundaries. You've got 0.9 of a metre slack in the plot width from the details that you're given. So if the speaker is right that the site isn't as wide, then there's some scope to still be able to fit the building on site successfully. Now we can put a condition on that the building has a metre side space, and what he may do to comply with that condition, he may drop his building 10 centimetres or something in width to implement it. Those kind of changes go along all the time.
Thank you, Chair. I think that because of the contentious nature of the relevance towards the bungalow next door, I'd like to see it as a condition that the dimensions that are on the drawing for the gap either side, either 1.9 or the 1 metre, are maintained as the lines for the building. And because if the architect has made that much of a gaff on his measurements, then he needs to be the one to take responsibility for reducing the building accordingly.
Mr. Stranks, have you got a response to that?
We're talking about it, Chairman. If you can bear with us a sec.
Bear with us, members.
Chairman, if the error was in the magnitude of the, say, the building being a metre wider than can be built, then the applicant wouldn't be able to build the building. He'd have to come back, as you sometimes see, with a revised application. My suspicion is we might be talking over something like 10 centimetres. So, but I'm only from looking at the site and looking at the plans, you know, a brick's thickness or whatever. So if it's minor, there may be some scope within the site. But if it's you know, a metre, something of that magnitude, where, as the speaker said, by the time you put a metre in either side and you put the building width proposed, and it doesn't achieve a metre, then he would be subject to enforcement action if he built it. But what a lot of these builders find sometimes is they say 10 centimetres out, and what they do is they just shorten the building slightly. And visually, you probably wouldn't notice it. So it depends when they go to implement it, what they actually find. I'm sure if the building didn't fit, the neighbours would tell us. But if members are thinking they want a 1.9 metre side space on that side, then they would have to vote to approve it with a condition like that.
Thank you for that, Mr. Stranks. I would find it very strange that they haven't actually been on site and done their measurements.
Sorry, Chair, I missed that. Would you mind again?
I said I find it very strange that they haven't actually been on site to do their measurements. I hope they haven't been taking their measurements off land plans.
Well, we'd hope so, but I wasn't there when they measured it, and I haven't measured it myself, so I can't advise you, if you like, who's right. I've measured from the plan itself, and I found that it was half a metre out. So I think they said it was 11.5 wide. I've measured it, I think it's 11.25. Sorry, that's quarter of a metre out. So there was a factor of error. Now it's on a hard copy, so that may be paper stretching when we print, but I can't tell you accurately what the dimension is. Another thing to bear in mind, without muddying the waters too much, is developers often go by what's on their deeds, the land they've bought. And what you can sometimes find is they go on site and say, hang on a minute, we're missing half a metre here. And then they start finding the people's existing fences are in the wrong place. And that starts a war over boundary disputes. So you've got to, we have no access as officers to the legal entity that is being developed. We take the plans in good faith, they certify accordingly. But if when they get on the ground and they find that that the fences to adjoining properties aren't in the right place, sometimes the error is not the developers, it's the adjoining properties. None of this we know, but it sometimes comes out when development is being implemented. They find that they've not got the width they thought they had.
Thank you. After being on site, I don't think there was the boundaries on both properties either side. I don't think there was 3 metres there anyway. So that cannot be a situation.
Sorry, Chair, my point is not that the boundaries will always achieve 1 metre. What it is the difference between the deed pack, the legal ownership of the plot that the developer has, and he finds out that his neighbours have perhaps encroached 6 inches on his land or something like that. We don't know that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reeves.
One more, thank you, Chair. I would think that it would not be unreasonable for the committee to actually consider requesting that the 1.9 on the left-hand side and the 1 metre on the right-hand side be part of the conditions. If the architect hasn't actually checked out his measurements, that's his dereliction of duty, and he suffers the consequences. One of the things that I do actually stress, when we went to site, the one thing that we did obviously all agree on was that there would need to be some sort of boundary treatment to get the fence panels solidly up against the bungalow. The thing is, I understand what you're saying about having the meter between the actual new build and the fencing, but if you then have, let's say, a flower bed or whatever, for whatever, just for the conversation, that's going to be about 600 wide, something like that. That's going to leave 400 mil for a footpath down the side there. Now, if you're thinking of actually raising that footpath so as it comes up to the level of the retaining wall, then you've got a huge up and down either side, and you've got a damp-proof issue onto the building.
I think Councillor Reeves, we're theorising now rather than we need to make the decisions on the practicality of the sizes.
Chair, sorry to prolong the agony, but it depends how you construct your wall. You can do, you know, the steel shuttering that tessellates in, like they use it when they make precast concrete. You can do a wall like that, which is like a series of thin tubes that goes down several feet, maybe 10, 12 feet. And it because of the depth of it, it holds the wall back, but it's very thin. So it depends on the design of the wall and the engineering that's involved. There are various ways of doing it. There's the way, as the members suggest, where you could perhaps do it and then have a block planter of some sort, make it an attractive feature. And there is other ways where you can do it very thinly. But that would be down to the details that we would seek with the condition. So yeah, Katie's going to try and show you the location plan, sorry, the site plan, and maybe this will help clarify, but you'll see they're doing it two ways. They're doing a planter in the front with the car parking, probably because it makes the car parking area more attractive, but then they're showing a parallel line detail, which shows a thinner approach beside the buildings. What I want to make clear is the gap isn't to serve as a pedestrian access to the garden. That's not a requirement of your guidance. It's a gap to keep built forms apart, particularly at first floor level. So the metre side space is to prevent that coalescent terracing effect that I described earlier. It's not the convenience of being able to get to your garden and get the grass clippings out and other stuff like that. So as long as the built forms are separated by 1 metre, it matters less as to what that surface functions as, whether it's a convenient pathway to get to the garden or whatever. But there are various engineering solutions that you can achieve retaining walls. I'm trying to think of the name where you put the thin piles in and it escapes me. No, there's another name that I've come across in the past, but yeah, it might be called contiguous pile, but I don't know.
Okay, we're going into detail. We don't need to go into at this moment in time. We are labouring this regarding the actual size of the plot because it is important. If they haven't measured the plot initially and they have gone off plans and that plot size is wrong, then yeah, we've got some issues. So they need to be conditioned in with what we're actually talking about. Can I move on to Councillor Stanley, please?
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask for that condition, actually, to make sure that the plot is what has been designed to do, and where the ground levels to the rear of the properties of 32, to make sure that the levels are upheld so that next door's garden doesn't fall in, or the fencing fall in to number 9. My other point I want to make was road protection. Can we condition anything where obviously we're going to get heavy traffic on that road, and can we put a condition in to protect the road, or any damage done to the road that would be repaired by the contractor or the developer?
Thank you, Councillor Stanley.
And the other question that I've got here is to do with flooding, and I noticed that they're going to bring in an architect or whatever it is to give us an idea of how they're going to retain surface water. Will that be looked at by our council, or would that be looked at by the Essex County Council surface water people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stanley. Your first point, I think, we're taking into consideration. Your second point, we'll have to refer because it is actually an unadopted road, I believe.
Chairman, the management of surface water would be under the building regs, so it wouldn't come before.
Just to come to my third point, which that will be under the regulations. So if you could cover the first 2 points, please.
Do you want me to go back to road protection or? Yeah.
I'm afraid so.
That's okay. You can't have some kind of condition that enforces the protection of the road. What you can have, as members have suggested earlier, you can have a survey. This is what the county council do, where there's a photographic survey of the street before development commences, and then a photographic survey when development is completed. Okay. Now, your problem in doing that is proving what damage was done by the developers. Now, this is a nice new street with new houses. Unlikely that those people as yet may be having work done themselves. But if there was a neighbouring site that was having work done, say an extension, conservatory, I don't know, something like that, you'd have to be able, the developer would have to prove that the damage that was done wasn't done by his machines or operatives. So providing, you know, there's a reasonable chance with photographic evidence it sort of doesn't lie, but if providing there's no issue like that, you can get the developers to make good the surface. But it's sometimes the case on the bigger sites, some of the big ones we've had, I don't know, 500 dwellings and that somebody else has built a couple of houses round the corner and the big builders get blamed for the mud on the road and the damage and everything else. I mean, in actual fact, it's the people working nearby who have done the damage, but it's proving that.
Did we actually establish who owns that road? Because it's unadopted, so...
Yeah, I didn't establish what could well be the case, that it becomes adopted later when the site is finished out with the care home. But as we speak, and possibly at the time of implementing this permission, if you grant it, it would be unadopted.
The third point is covered under building regulations. The first point we've discussed. Okay, Councillor Stanley. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a number of questions and things I'd need clarification for. Could I ask the officer to put up the drawing, the first drawing that you put up right back at the start of the presentation, please? Sorry, I meant the draw, not the site plan, the drawing itself. Okay, right.
Do you mean the real drawing, Councillor?
Yeah.
The overhead drawing.
No. It was the one. Go back to the one you just had up, and I'll pick it up from there. Okay. If you can zoom out of the picture. You're going right. Okay. Stop there. The drawing to the lower right on the roof there, that shows solar panels to the rear, but 3 Velux windows to the front, or to the side there. I'm assuming they're Velux windows or Velux type windows. Yeah, those 3 there. That gives me a concern. I appreciate that the balcony, which we can see where that was where that little bit of sloping roof was, that has been removed. I accept that. But you've still got those 3 windows over and above the height, which is a 3rd-storey height. So that gives a far greater overlooking into the rear garden of the bungalow adjacent. That's my first question, if that is the case. With regards to where the balcony has been removed, will that be conditioned that no window is put in its place? Because currently the drawing there shows a doorway or some form of Juliet type balcony. So that will be a blank wall. It shows it there with a window. Sorry, go the opposite direction. Oh, sorry, you were looking at the Velux there. Yeah, the window I'm talking about currently is the one over was the balcony in the top left-hand picture. Okay, I assume that will be removed because, again, whether the balcony is there or not, that will still create overlooking. So that's my next concern. With regards to the green belt aspect, my memory, when it was back many, many years ago, that when that site was to be developed, that section of ground, when it was removed, was meant to be put back to green belt, i.e. that driveway or the surface that is there currently should have been removed. So that's an interesting point. I still got concerns about the fencing down the side. I've heard what officers have said about the various types of retaining wall there. The question I would ask there is, I appreciate that it comes under slightly different legislation, but who oversees that and makes sure that that is done? Is it comes under building regulations, or who is going to oversee that particular time? I'm very concerned about the measurements of the site. If it turns out that the building is too big for the site, okay, the architect can reduce the size of the building, accept that. But does that then mean that the size of the rooms, i.e. the bedrooms, for example, will meet policy if he has to reduce the size of the building? I think reducing the size of the building for the architect is quite simple, but does it meet policy? With regards to the access road, I know it's not adopted. I think I'm right in saying that the current owner of the driveway there will be Essex Housing, which is a subsidiary of Essex County Council. They were the original developers there. If there is a mind to agree this, there is obviously going to be a big issue about deliveries of goods and removal of earth, etc., concrete, all the rest of it into that road. Yes, the point's been raised about damage to the road. I hear what's been said. But there's obviously going to be a conflict because there are a lot of residents that live along that little section of road. They don't have anywhere else to park other than on their properties. So how will that be mitigated to make sure that there isn't a conflict come forward there? Building times, if there is a mind to bring this forward, will there be a condition on building times because it is surrounded completely by developments, particularly at weekends, bank holidays, to make sure there's some form of control on that particular situation. I still have a lot of concerns about the access into the site for the vehicles. That is right adjacent to the pedestrian entrance to the adjacent site. Yes, most cases their big gates are open, but not always. And when we were on site, that was mentioned. So I have a concern about people coming out from there and vehicles coming out because the height of that fence, somebody could be walking down that pavement through that gate and not realise the vehicle's coming out from the site. So again, that gives me a concern. So they're my initial concerns, Chairman. Perhaps I'll have some clarification on some of those points and go from there.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. So just let me get you right. Well, firstly, regarding the gates into Trustlink, they are kept open all day while they're actually on site. So, yeah, your concerns regarding the pedestrian access and also with the vehicles offloading and loading, they have confirmed that they are actually open while that building is actually being occupied. So just let me, regarding the removal of the balcony, you're saying you also removal of the window into that bedroom. Regarding the size of the plot, I think we're very much looking into that because it is a concern that if it hasn't actually been physically measured, then and the building doesn't fit, yes, you're right, does that then affect the actual design of the building? Because this building seems to be being reduced every time we talk about it. There's a bit's taken off it, so if it's going to be reduced even further. Mr. Stranks, are you able to come in on that?
I'll try, Chairman. Concern at the pedestrians and the access gates, we spoke about that. Members will have to take a view. There's nothing that... Sorry, yeah. Concern about the pedestrian and gates and truss links. Members saw the site officers saying that the Highway Authority have no objection. There's a condition about the height of the fencing to give visibility. Members need to take a view on that. Building times, you can put on a condition. Officers don't, if you like it, because when you're saying you can't build and it's noise, normally if you've got big noisy diggers and excavators and cement mixers and stuff, yes. But if they wanted to go in there and plaster or paint, you're stopping them doing that work. And obviously if you're constraining them, then it'll take longer to build. And this is only a single plot anyway. But if members are comfortable with a working hours, usually I think it's 7 in the morning till 1 o'clock on a Saturday and 7 in the morning till 5 on a weekday, then members could put such a condition on. You have before, but the enforceability of it becomes difficult from time to time. As with if you're receiving deliveries, you have to bear in mind sometimes the lorries and things get held up. So whereas they intended to be within your hours, they might arrive late. They might arrive at 5:30 one night instead of when the site is supposed to shut at 5 o'clock, but they're still waiting for it. So you can't promise that every time they work on site that those hours might not be breached. The enforcement officers would have to take a view if it was an exception or was reasonable in the conditions, rather than, you can't give an absolute guarantee that they wouldn't be working in breach of those conditions from time to time. So,
can I just interrupt on that one? I think the problem is going to be more of until the level of the land or the basic footings are put in place and they can actually get access to the site to actually park their vehicles. Until that point, there's nowhere else for them to put them. If there's nowhere to offload. So it's really the initial period of time while they're actually getting the land, if it is approved, getting the land actually ready to be able to put.
yeah, but if you see that where you get a typical street where they knock down one and build one, then yes, there's some parking in the street, as you say, until the site gets opened up. But once they get in off the site, it's in their own interest to get off the road, because they don't want bricks and building materials left on the street. Firstly, it's against the Highways Act, so people could have an accident. You've got to put lamps round things and stuff like that. They want to get it in the site, but there's an initial period where, because they can't get access to the site, they've got to create the access, which is what I think you're saying. But the hours of operation, if members feel that makes a difference, you could put that in. What the problem is when you're trying to enforce things like hours and noise, or enforce noise through hours, it's the actual noisy activity which is the offence. So it's better placed under environmental health law, because they can do something about it instantly. If you think of the way the planning machinery enforces, it serves a notice, there's a period of compliance, possible appeal. All that time, the breach is occurring, because the planning Act legislation aren't equipped.
Sorry, Mr. Stranks, can I just hold you? Councillor Steptoe, were you more concerned about the actual pedestrian rather than the noise element, I believe?
Yeah, Chairman, pedestrian coming out of the site, when we were there, the chap from Truss Links did say that the gates are closed at certain times. They weren't open all of the time. I think predominantly not so much on, say, Sundays and things like that. So if people are coming out of the development site, it is right adjacent to that pedestrian access. And of course we're dealing, and we need to be mindful that they are vulnerable people that are going to be using that access.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. So, Mr. Stranks, as I thought, we're not actually talking about noise, we're talking about safety element of the access and the times when...
I mean, members can put a condition on if they see fit. If the applicant wanted to appeal it, they could, but you'd have to take your chance. The issue of safety, the Highway Authority have accepted it. Now, It's different where you have a proposed, say the guy was proposing a factory on this site, and there would be, for the duration of the use, a constant conflict with the comings, goings of people on the footpath. You have some power there to control it, but with just the construction activity, the months that it would take to build it, it's only temporary for the life of the construction period. So you have to look at, would the harm be so great over that short-term period, as opposed to if somebody was making, I don't know, widgets there or something and had deliveries at all sorts of times in conflict with the school next door or the special needs next door. That would be for the duration of the use. So you get more support either on refusals or appeals and things where you've got a duration of a use. This would only be temporary. Whether the bedrooms would meet the policy, well, it's down again to, if the developer finds that he can't fit the building on the site, then he hasn't got planning permission. He'd have to bring an application back before you. But if it's slight, as I keep talking about, something like 10 centimetres, then that would probably be within usual, what they call building tolerances. The policing of the party wall, that is not a planning department function or a planning committee function. I can say that I know former colleague who was the head of building control. I think because of his professional membership, Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, he told me once or twice he became that third surveyor to arbitrate. But that was through his professional body. I don't think it was to do with the responsibility of the council. Whatever way that falls out, it's not the responsibility of the planning department or this committee. So the Party Wall Act is effectively privately policed between the parties. It's nothing to do with planning. The green belt issue of the removal of the surface, I wasn't familiar with that application, didn't deal with that, but the site of the 14 houses excludes this site. And remember, at the time that Roachway was redeveloped, Trusslinks was still operational. So this is a consequence of the 14 houses being built, giving a better access to Trusslinks, making this site redundant, no longer necessary. If we can see the section in the roof, please, if the machine will wake up and allow us to do that. With the Veluxes in the roof rooms, there's a section on there somewhere. There you go. That says 1.7 metres, does it? I can't see it. Yeah. So when you have obscure glazing of windows and you have balcony heights, and in the permitted development rights, they talk about the obstructed height being 1.7 metres from the finished floor level. So the base of the roof lights needs to be sat in the roof at 1.7 metres above that level. The idea being you get light in and some view of the sky, but you can't look down into the neighbouring windows. Okay? So that installation of the roof lights would be to the standard in the permitted development rights, and what you've employed in your conditions actually prior to the PD doing that. So at that level, 1.7 from finished floor level, the amount of overlooking would be pretty difficult. You'd have to like stand on chairs or steps or something and open the window deliberately to peer down. The casual overlooking by virtue of the window wouldn't be significant.
And the taking away of the balcony and the bedroom window.
Chair, that is a problem because the if we can look at the elevation, please. Sorry, the window you would expect in a front wall. Now it might well be that the room's of a size that it's not dependent on that window. The building will be better looking having a window in there. But if members wanted to delete that, that's going to some extreme views. The room is not very big, and it's got a window on the back that you can see, so it may not be dependent on it. So what do you say? Yeah, yeah, it's recessed, but it's up to members really how if they feel it makes a difference to have that window deleted, you'd have to have a condition deleting that front window. It would spoil the architecture a bit, but the applicant may not be dependent on it because of the room size. He gets a window at the back.
Thank you, Mr. Stranks. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. I've heard everything. the officer has said. I understand the point about what I'm referring to as Velux windows. I take that point. But I still have that concern about that bedroom window. It will be overlooking if that window is still retained. Yes, I think it will have an effect on the bedroom itself. But hey, that's what the architect has given in front of us. I still feel that the site, as I said before at the previous meeting, is out of keeping with its surroundings. Yes, it fits very nicely with the building next door. As you look at the site to the right, it's a mirror image of that particular building. But I do not feel that it's taken into account the size of the building on the other side. The drawings are very vague in showing that particular building. It sort of gives a bit of the wall, but it doesn't really show it, so I think it's misleading. If the development was coming forward and it was having a bungalow on there, I don't think I'd have too many objections. But this building is far bigger and it will overlook the back garden of the house property next door. And I'm sorry, but I can't get away from that.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Councillor FD.
Thank you, Chairman. I remember the last meeting where this came up and the officer used adequate a great many times. And I feel this building is below adequate. It does not fall in with our guidance. The garden is not acceptable for Rochford District Council. And reading the new PPF, which came through the other day, I look it up on here, and the school, what used to be the sports ground that runs behind, which the officer said they could use for a green space, with the new, what's on the grey belt, that could be built on. Rochford has got a fine space of 10,500 houses. Southend's got a fine space for 35,000. Other places have got a fine space, and we've got all the green space. So who's not going to say this place is going to be built on? And the garden is not adequate. If these places get built on, the garden is never going to be adequate. It's going to be unfair. This house is too big for where it's going to go. And if they reduce the size, like Councillor Steptoe says, I wouldn't have so much objections to a bungalow that actually meets our criteria and our guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor FD. Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got similar concerns to Councillor Steptoe with the officer spoke about just materials being delivered, but when that site's being dug out, you're going to have JCBs and you're going to have lorries that have got to be loaded up, so it will block the road. So I have a concern on that, but obviously there's not a lot we can do about that. But I would like to propose the conditions on working. The officer said when you've got painters and plasterers in, they're not making any noise. I've worked on enough building sites now to know that they like their radios quite loud, and it would be very obtrusive to the neighbours. So I would like to propose formally that we put working conditions on there, that there is no working after 1 o'clock on a Saturday, no working on a Sunday or bank holidays. And obviously we're not going to be able to enforce it, but if they break those rules, then the residents around there have then got calls to go to the health people and environmental health and get it enforced. So I would like to formally propose those working hours as a condition. Thank you.
Mr. Stranks.
Just point of clarification, if I may, Chair. The enforcement under environmental health can happen now, regardless of the condition you're talking about. If you put it on as a planning condition, then you'd be looking for the planning department to enforce the hours condition. So it wouldn't be a matter that hours go on through the planning permission that the environmental health officers then enforce. The enforcement would be done, or be attempted to be done through the planning acts. The point I was trying to make is there's legislation in place in other areas like environmental health about noise. I'll give you just quickly one example to prove the point. Residents were complaining about an excavator on a site once and everything else. EHOs went down there, they measured it and found that the exhaust was cracked. And that's what was giving the problem, causing disturbance with tellies and all sorts of things like that. But that was I don't think it amounted to a prosecution, but once the developer was pointed out that's your problem, they put a new exhaust on it and it was then compliant with the noise legislation. So if members are thinking of an hours condition through planning, you'd be looking to enforce that under the Planning Acts, which is weak. If you want to stop noise being unreasonable, the residents would ring up the council's environmental health officers, who would do tests with machinery and science and would prove whether there was a noise and a need for an abatement notice. Nothing to do with planning.
Thank you. Councillor Constable.
Nevertheless, I would still like to put those conditions on the planning, and therefore I'd like to propose that they are put on it. I understand what the officer's saying, but without conditions, then the builder can have guys on there on a Sunday and they can have their radios going, and you know, if they've got the conditions on there, hopefully the builder will abide by those conditions and be what's known as a responsible constructor. So nevertheless, I would still like to propose those conditions go on. Thank you.
Thank you. One moment, please.
It's just if members are, I don't think it's been moved, but if members are moving approval subject to these conditions, we will need times when the matter comes up, Chair.
Councillor Constable, I hear what you're saying, but I also hear what Mr. Stranks is saying, and if it's a matter of getting a trader to adhere to not doing it because it's in writing, or the fact that we're stronger with enforcement through normal noise abatement, etc., would it not be best to rely on that rather than put it in a condition?
No, well, I think we had this discussion at, I think, one of the previous planning meetings when we put time conditions on for working, and that was acceptable then, so I see no reason why it can't be acceptable now. I do understand what the officer's saying, and I would hope that the contractor would be a responsible contractor. So nevertheless, I would still like to propose that additional put in.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Constable. Bear with me a second, please. Okay, so obviously we'd need you to propose and second, but we'd need to know what hours you'd like to actually put down on that. Sorry, Councillor Reeves.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, normal working hours, I believe, on site is 7:30 to 4:30, and up to 1 o'clock on a Saturday. No working on a Sunday or bank holidays.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Myers.
Chairman, can I just clarify something? I accept what Councillor Constable has put as a proposal, but that is would only be added to it if it is moved that we accept the application.
Fully aware of that.
I would like to make a proposal for refusal.
Sorry, Councillor Stanley, we've actually moving on from that a minute, and we're going somewhere else. So bear with me a minute. So, Councillor Steptoe, you've put a motion down for refusal, which It has been seconded by a couple of people so far, but before I take the seconder, can you give us the reasons for refusal, please?
Chairman, I'm not sure on the protocol here. Perhaps we'll have some advice on this. Councillor Constable's proposal was to add those conditions. Okay. I think that needs to be dealt with first because he put that.
No, I've actually taken advice, and
Okay.
if the motion for refusal goes through, then there's no reason to put the motions for doing the hour difference. So
Okay.
if you can give me your motions for refusal, please.
If that's the advice you've been given, I accept.
That's the advice I've been given.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I move refusal on the basis of the overlooking, particularly from the bedroom window, etc. there, and I'm going to use the word overdevelopment of the site in the sense that the building is far too big for the site and it needs to be a smaller building. Perhaps officers will be able to guide me a little bit better with the wording. And also the size of the garden don't meet policy.
I think what if we're going for refusal and what we've done in previous applications that have been refused, and we've been recommended to make sure we come up with one very strong point of refusal, but unfortunately they've been overturned on a number of occasions because I think we have to come up with some very strong points and material planning matters, which those three are. I'll just see how do the strength monitor on it. 1 second, please.
Thank you, Chair. So just to get some more detail on those three reasons, overlooking from the bedroom, can you just stipulate which bedroom and where the overlooking would occur?
It's the overlooking from that side of the new building into the rear garden of the bungalow next door, and the overlooking into Truss Links.
From the bedroom above the garage?
Without looking back at the plan, yes, I believe it's above the garage.
So from into the
Where
into
the
rear.
balcony used to be.
Okay, thank you. So into the rear garden of the bungalow next door and into the
Truss Links property.
into the property, or
The Truss Links area.
into the Truss Links area. Thank you. And then so overdevelopment, too big for the site. Can you just give a little bit more detail on what the harm is there?
Overpowering the bungalow next door.
Yeah.
And it's out of keeping with the bungalow next door.
Thank you. And then the size of the garden is presumably
I'd
so it's
like
below
that
standards,
policy.
and therefore it's non-usable.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Could I have a second on that proposal, please? Councillor Rafferty. We have a proposal and a seconder for a refusal of this application. Could I have a show of hands in favour of refusal of the application, please? Those against? Those abstaining? That is in favour of refusal. Councillor FDI, I'm going to have to carry on. Are you okay on the next item? Yeah. Item 6, 24000620, full workshop at Glazebrook Farm, Canewdon Road, Ashington. Mike Stranks will present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. If we just allow the screens to catch up with us, there you go. This application is to a site of former farm buildings that have been used lawfully for commercial uses for a number of years and located on the southern side, as you see, of Canewdon Road. It's an unusual, deep, rectangular plot there. The footpath link that you see across takes you up to Ashington Church, if you're familiar with it. The existing buildings on site vary in size with one large building. If we can look at a previous refuse plan, number 2, please. This application has been before members before. It was for 3 large chalet buildings, okay? And members refused permission on officers' advice due to the absence of an arboricultural report because there's some tree cover not shown on that plan on the site, an absence of an ecological report, absence of ground contamination given the report, given the commercial uses on the site, and that those designs, those particularly large buildings, if we can see the refused design plan, please, plan 3, they were considered when you look at the summation of the buildings on the site, and these 3 large buildings detrimental to the green belt. I think it worked out, in the figures are in the report, but they worked out bigger than what was there. The applicants appealed that decision. They didn't agree with the first reasons. They said that that declaration form that we asked for with these planning applications adequately covered ecology and there was no other suitable habitats on the site. The matter of tree protection they felt could have been dealt with by a condition, and same for the contamination. Where they agreed with the council was the size of the buildings. So what we have now, please, if we can look at the proposed layout, the applicants have taken the inspector's findings and the council's issues, particularly on the green belt, and they've come back with 6 small domestic scaled bungalows. If we can look at the street scene, please, plan 5. You'll see they've got hipped roofs, like pyramids, to keep the volume and mass down, and they're separated by parking spaces between the buildings, so they're a little cluster of low-rise bungalows. Members will see that the typical height of the bungalows now proposed would be 5.3 metres and some 3.6 metres lower than the larger building on the site that dominates the site. The previous refused chalets were 2 metres higher than these. The reduction in volume overcomes the previous inspector's criticism of the earlier scheme, and members will see that representations made regarding the loss of commercial premises, given the availability of commercial space elsewhere and the increased pressure for housing, officers conclude on balance that these commercial premises are not significant enough to warrant protection. On the addendum, members will see the update to references to the National Planning Policy Framework issued last week. The relative remoteness of this site to the urban built-up envelopes of Fambridge, Canewdon, Ashington and Hockley is such that officers do not feel it plays a strong or significant role in protecting the built-up area. It's not on the edge of the built envelopes and therefore contributing to urban sprawl, or impacting on the historic cores of Rochford. So it would qualify as grey belt. The site is thus considered to meet the definition of grey belt, and in officers' view, government policy doesn't materially change the recommendation. So therefore, the recommendation is approval subject to the conditions set out in the report, and in addition, those conditions 18 and 19, as you'll see set out in the addendum, which if I remind myself, the addendum. Yeah. No. Yeah, you'll see that on reflection of the recommendation, given that the matter turns for us in green belt terms on the volumes and massing, we're asking, if you're minded to approve it, to include 2 additional conditions on the removal of permitted development rights for extensions, condition 18, and removal of permitted development rights for roof alterations, condition 19. Subject to the inclusion of those 2 additional conditions, in addition to the 17 that you've got in the recommendation is to approve.
Ward members, councillors Belton, Carter and Constable. We have no visiting members. Committee member, Councillor Constable, wish to talk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to ask what the difference was, and that's now quite obvious from what the planning inspector said. But I got the impression that the planning inspector was saying that the build as such of building houses was inappropriate. But if the officer's saying that it was the size of the buildings that were inappropriate, not the number, then that's fair enough. But I'm very concerned about the actual road that it's on. It's a 60-mile-an-hour road with a dangerous bend with poor access to the site. I don't know if any of those drawings show any splays being asked for or anything like that on the access road in and out of the building with the hedges or whatever. So I don't know if you've got any drawings showing the actual access, but I'm very concerned about the actual road, because instead of commercial vehicles going in and out, you're going to be having, with bungalows, you could be having older people pulling in and out, or young people pulling in and out. And I'm very concerned about that as a point of access for the site. It's a big consideration, and it's a dangerous road anyway.
Thanks, Councillor Constable. Mr. Stranks.
Thank you, Chair. We're just trying to wake the machine up again and get the layout plan. There you go. Oh, he's on our one. There you go. They're utilising the existing access. So that has taken commercial vehicles, you know, slow moving or whatever. What it would now use, I think there's still some commercial at the top of the site, if I recall, but you'd have domestic vehicles going out here. I take the point about varying ability of drivers, etc. But as this access is capable of taking commercial traffic, there should be no problem with it taking domestic associated uses. Yes, you will get delivery vans, removal vans and things like this on occasion, but the everyday domestic traffic, cars, motorbikes, small vans, etc., this access being existing and used in the way it already is, should be no problem. You'll see that the Highway Authority do not object to the access.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Stranks. I understand that. I would just like it on notice that I'm not quite happy with that road. And point of order on Essex County Council, they very rarely object to anything with buildings anyway. So that's fair enough. But I just want it on record that I'm not happy with it being on a 60-mile-an-hour road. Thank you.
Okay, you're on live stream, Councillor Constable, so it's now on record. Just to clarify on the point regarding the refusal last time, I think there was quite a number of reports which had not actually been presented regarding the previous application. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I ask the officer to put that drawing up of the red line plan you had up just a second ago? Okay. Where the access is, I'm not that familiar with the site. I'm assuming the access is that little bit on the right, just there. Now, that bit between the red line and the dotted line of the edge of the road, is that grass verge? What is that? It's a little, what I'm wondering is why there is not some form of a bell mouth on that design, which would make that a lot safer.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. It's a pity Councillor Reeves can't actually answer because he's been in and out of that for how many years, Councillor Stranks?
Chairman, if you could call it grass, you'll probably find that it's sort of like a trampled, what probably at one stage was a verge. But you know how accesses get run on and then they put chip-ins in and things, and then, you know, sometimes vehicles park there rather than go in. It's that kind of informal lay-by. There's a bus stop just by the footpath. So I think it'd be unkind to call it a grass verge because there's very little grass there, but it's like an expanse of.
Do we not have an aerial?
No, I don't think we do.
Something.
It's sort of like a concrete sort of parking area. Some people use it as a lay-by, dump stuff. You know, that is that kind of. It's perfectly wide enough for vehicles. If it helps members while we look at plans and things. If I can defend our highway colleagues, members, it's not the first time I've heard people say highways never object. There's a reason for that, Chair. When developers go to spend money on preparing plans and things, they often talk to the Highways Authority first. I'm sometimes involved in those discussions and have been present when highways have said no. But the developers, if highways are going to say no and therefore make your job easier, as it were, they're not going to submit a plan that highways object to. So unless they want to take the Highways Authority on, which is sometimes the case, they bring back to the council a plan or a proposal that the Highways Authority will find acceptable. So that's why more often than not, you see no objection because they've done their homework behind the scenes with the Highway Authority.
Thank you, Mr. Stranks. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very concerned about that. And we just had a quick look on Google Earth here. It does look a very tight area. I'm surprised that highways haven't said that there should be some form of a larger bell mouth there to make that a much safer entrance. I do have that as a concern, picking up Councillor Constable's issues. The only other observation I would make is that wouldn't it be nice if those bungalows were put in on the last application? It would have fitted in nicely. But there you go, can't do that.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chair. On page 6.11, and that will be on the just above the 2.1, it does actually say the proposed development would result in inappropriate development in the Metropolitan Green Belt. Now, having read that and then read the officer's report on the study that they did on the development, which actually says that it won't make any difference to the green belt, apart from, it says very special circumstances will not exist unless the potential harm to the green belt and any other harm is clearly outweighed by other considerations. I don't know what the...
Can you bear with me a second, please, Councillor Stanley? No, it's. I think that's relating to the previous application, not to this application.
Oh, I beg your pardon, Chair. Anyway, well, the point I'm trying to make is because there is a hedgerow. I have been down there. I've seen the site myself, and there is a large hedgerow down there, and I just want to clarify that that hedgerow will not be taken out for the purpose of either a pathway of that driveway or whatever the case is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Stanley, is that Mr. Stranks?
Chair, the hedge actually is not within the red line and within the scope of the site, but the trees behind it that are, and I'm sure somewhere in the recommended conditions there is a tree protection plan. So the council's arboriculturalist has identified those that are within the site and the need to retain those where he can. If I can just, without delaying, deal with inappropriate. The way the government policy works is the construction of new buildings, forget dwellings, but new buildings, is considered inappropriate. That's the starting point. But then the government policy goes on to explain that there are exceptions. And one of the exceptions for a number of years now has been where you have a site called previously developed land. It's got buildings on it, not agriculture, although these might have had a former life as agriculture. You can knock those down and replace them. We've done it with Bulwood Hall. We've done it on the site next door to the previous application, Roach Way. That's perfectly acceptable in the green belt. The trick is to get the size of the new development to be better in green belt terms and particularly openness than what is there. So put in very simple terms, take away big and put back smaller. And what happened with the previous application on this site, the inspector felt the 3 large ones were inappropriate because they were too big. Officers are saying that now these smaller ones collectively are small enough to be appropriate. Yeah?
Thank you, Mr. Stranks. Any other members wishing to speak? Okay, in that case.
Chairman, if I may, sorry to cut you short there. We've just looked at a very good picture here on Google Earth, and I do have great concerns. I don't know if others can see that. The entrance is very narrow and there's a lot of high hedges. If you're a commercial vehicle coming out of there, you'll be sitting that much higher. And you'll be able to see out past that, all that greenery. Is it potentially possible, although it is outside the red line of the site, that we have some form of condition put in that actually mitigates some of the concerns around that hedge, particularly, well, I think it's right in saying the western side of the entrance? Yeah, western side of the entrance. Is that something potentially that we could put on as a condition that is improvement? I've got a very similar junction in Great Wakering that I'm continuously having to get the landowner to cut the hedge back because of the damage it keeps doing. And another accident this week, a very similar sort of thing.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe.
Chairman, being outside of the red line, it would be very difficult to enforce a condition if members were so minded because it wouldn't be within the applicant's control. Sorry, being outside of the red line of the site, it's not possible to put a condition on that could be enforced. It's not within the applicant's control to do something about cutting the hedge back. If they own that piece of land, yes, but they've not shown on the plan before you that it's within the red line forming the application site, so therefore you can't tie it to the consent.
Okay.
Chairman, if I could just come back on that, I'd put my next week's money on the fact that that hedge is owned by the landowner adjacent. If that was coming up from enforcement from highways, as we often get, the first place they would look is to the landowner, and I would guess that will be a riparian land ownership issue.
Mr. Stranks.
Hopefully we can show you the plan of the access. There you go. So your scope as a committee to impose matters by way of condition are within generally that red line. And as that land we're talking about, the overgrown nature of the hedge is outside, they're telling us in this application they don't control the land north of that red line. So if they have hedges within their ownership that have grown out over the highway, then they have a responsibility to cut them back. But if those hedges have grown out onto highway land over time, if they've rooted and sprouted and now in the highway, they become this council, I suppose, from a point of view of managing as agents for the highway. But it would be unreasonable to ask, well, you couldn't do it. The applicant shouldn't, in theory, enter somebody else's land to do something we've asked them to that's not within their control.
Okay. Councillor Myers, can I just have a look at your laptop a minute, please?
Chairman, if I may, as county council, I spend my life chasing around grass verges and hedges like this, particularly around in my area. I would advise that probably the first metre from the road going in towards the hedge would be cut regularly by probably one of the local farmers under contract to county. But anything over and that will be responsibility of the riparian landowner. Although it may be outside the red line of the development we're talking about, I would still stand by the fact that that's going to be riparian land ownership. I bet there's a ditch in there somewhere.
Okay. Obviously, we're here to determine the 6 bungalows and the planning. That will be noted, Mr. Stranks, in respect of the.
It being informative.
Yes. Right, I will proceed to a motion. It's proposed that the committee resolves that planning permission be approved, subject to conditions on pages 6.2 to 6.9. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Stanley. Please can we have a show of hands on a vote to approve? Those against? Those abstaining? That motion is carried. Item 7, 2400401 REM, land north of London Road, west of Rorath Industrial Estate, Rorath Lane, Rayleigh. Mike Stranks will present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. If members bear with us while the machine again catches us up. It does seem to go asleep a bit when we debate, so Katie's frantically trying to call up the first plan that I need to orientate you, which is 001 if it helps. I think here it comes. Maybe not. Oh, there we go. Okay, this application is to part of the Wolsey Park development between London Road to the south of Rayleigh and Rorath Lane to the north. Members can see from that image, you've got the farmland further to the west and the Rorath Industrial Estate to the east. We're looking at that parcel of land edged in red for those that can see it with the cursor there. It's part of the latter phases of the site, phase 3. I think last committee you dealt with one the other side of the road to this there where the cursor is now. If we could look at the 04 coloured site layout, please. It's a scheme for, it's reserved matters following outline. So the principle of the development, etc., has already been long established. These are the details, house types, layouts, garden areas, access for the individual plots, and the material detailing. You'll see there's a central access point staggered to the parcel that you dealt with last month. You'll see where the cursor is there now. For anyone who's worried why we're not using the light saber, it doesn't reflect off these screens. It does the walls, but that's why we can no longer point. So we're dependent on the cursor until we think of something better. So 136 dwellings. You'll see the report explains the different house types. There's affordable housing, as you would expect. If we can look at 07, there's a plan 07, there's a plan there. The plans, if we get, that's it, come up a bit, great. You'll see the ones that are edged, the red edged ones are your social rent buildings. You'll see that the larger buildings there are apartments, and the blue edged building, one apartment block to the left of the screen and a pair of semis in the middle, therefore the part ownership. So that all complies with your policy. The remaining houses that you can see in white are the open market houses. If we can look at street scene 1, this will give you a composition. If we can edge out a bit, because I'd like to show what part of the site they relate to. The top 2 images are a continuation. They obviously don't fit on the plan, and they are the bit at the top where the cursor is, to the front onto the Spine Road, okay? And then the bottom two screens are the parallel line through the centre of the site once you get into it. So it gives you the two key streets. If we can look at street scene 2, this gives you the edges, the ends of the development. The top one is to the east. Again, if we can see out the problem there, and Katie will hopefully that's it. So that's that edge looking back at the site, and then the next one down is the far end towards the sort of Rorath Lane and open space areas. If we can look at the apartment elevations, just hover on them in a bit of detail. The first one is 17. It gives members a flavour. You'll see there's some debate in the officer report about the use of the iron railings to the balconies. That's a common feature to the existing estate. I think the urban designers were flirting with the idea of using glass balustrades, that they might be acceptable, but officers have felt that to keep the continuity of the development with the other phases, that those are acceptable and haven't asked for them to be changed. If we look at 18, which is just another block of the different house types, slight change in materials and palette there. And then we can run through quickly the house types. The forget-me-not at 021, if that's possible, if I go too fast. Gives members a flavour of what that house type. And then the next one, 23, the hyacinth. I think these are all named after flowers. Lavender, which is 25. And 29, the sunflower. These are used in various ways to create form, turn corners of streets, etc. And if we come back to the layout, please, 04. No. If we go on to the layout so members can get a broad shape of the development as a whole. Members will see from the report that the applicant has previously revised the application. So this isn't as was submitted. The urban designer made comments. The applicants responded to those where they could, and it's got it to a level where officers can recommend approval to you. On the addendum, members will see that in light of the revised National Planning Policy Framework published last week, officers' conclusion is that the new NPPF does not change the recommendation before you. Also on the addendum, members see there's a response from the County Highway Authority. We did actually have that, but it was misfiled, so we found that and put that before you. That's why we couldn't put it in the report. So the officer recommendation is to approve, subject to the conditions set out in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Stranks. We have one public speaker for this item. Mr. Smith, would you like to speak in support of the application? If you could come along. Are you au fait with the equipment?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, you have 5 minutes to make your speech.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the applicant, thank you for the opportunity to address the committee this evening. The applicant would like to thank our case officer and the statutory consultees for their help in the preparation of a scheme that has a recommendation for approval. Pre-application discussions began in June of last year, but the character of Wolsey Park has already been established through the outline plan permission and the parcels that have already been constructed, including parcel 16 immediately to the north, which the committee approved last month. We have worked hard to make sure that a high-quality scheme is created, continuing the successful character and delivering the density, layout and appearance needed to match the phases and parcels that have already been approved. And this includes the detailed input from the design team at Place Services. A range of accommodation is proposed with 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom houses and apartments for affordable rent, shared ownership and sale on the open market, so that a sustainable and balanced community can be created, and the scheme is designed to be tenure blind. The affordable housing meets the needs identified by the Council's housing team, including the delivery of 5 wheelchair-adapted apartments. The scheme also includes the final section of the frontage to the main street and the creation of a green link from east to west, connecting the landscape areas to either side of the site and delivering the feature that defines the character of the scheme. The strategic elements of the wider site are already in place to address other issues, including adding biodiversity value through the green infrastructure, securing and enhancing wildlife habitats, surface water drainage to the ponds and basins to the west, and a bus route along the main street. Energy efficiency, renewable energy, and electric vehicle charging are also secured by the outline planning permission and delivered by the proposed scheme. There are no objections from statutory consultees and no comments from the neighbours in the new homes to the north. The proposed scheme has been designed in accordance with the outline planning permission and parameter plans and continues the established character of the scheme at Wolsey Park. As such, I trust you will concur with the case officer's recommendation and resolve to approve the reserved matters.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ward members, councillors Cripps, Newport and Stanley. No visiting members wishing to speak?
I'd like to speak after
Mr.
the
Stanley,
debate.
would you like to speak as a committee member or a ward member?
Committee member, thank you.
Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a little bit of a concern as to where the amenity space is on that development. The owners of properties wouldn't find a large amenity space on that site. There isn't, from what I can see, there isn't one, and I'd like to see one. In effect of there's such a lot of building going on. The only other thing that I'm concerned about is that where we've got 4-bedroomed houses, we don't seem to have 3 parking spaces on the basis that there will be at least 3 vehicles in a 4-bedroomed house. And I wondered if there might be some adjustment that we could make on that as to, perhaps not, but I would like to see extra parking spaces on 4-bedroom houses.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. I will ask Mr. Stranks to respond.
Thank you, Chair. I'll deal with the last first. The car parking standards used to, 20 years ago, do as members have suggested. Where you had 4 bedrooms or more, you used to have 3 car parking space requirement, and a lot of the builders, because they didn't like the idea of a car parked in front of a house, they used to build a lot of double garages. So you had a double garage with what is effectively a 4th parking space, which was unnecessary. The government turned that on its head and said the science is good, but we'll make the car parking spaces maximums. So instead of saying you need at least 3 or 2 or 4 spaces, you need a maximum of. And what your standards that you've had now for a number of years require is 1 parking space for a 1-bedroom flat, 2 car parking spaces for anything that is more than one bedroom. So you could have a 5-bedroom house and it only required 2 parking spaces. They are a little bit bigger now, 5.5 by 2.9 wide. But the requirement is to provide a maximum of 2 spaces per unit for 4 beds, yeah, and then a quarter of a space, that's 1 space for every 4 dwellings, for car parking. And you'll see that the report before you says that there's actually a surplus across the site. I think it's 15 or 17 spaces for visitors. So it would be difficult, if we can put the layout up, it would be difficult to find room for extra parking if members are particularly concerned about that, because the development is, if you like, complete, the pattern is full, and you're asking for what is already over and above a surplus. All the spaces are compliant with those they need for the dwellings, and they're also compliant and more for the visitors. Now, dealing with the other point about the little space there, I think what members might be asking is about play equipment. Maybe not, but play equipment. Yeah, the omission of play equipment on this particular parcel is deliberate, because there was a requirement in the outline for a landscaped link through the middle, and this is part of it. You'll see the officer's recommendation is that avenue be actually enhanced even more than it is with tree planting. That's a condition. They've done some the urban designers and the case officer feel they could do more through that link that goes through the middle. And that space there is deliberately, I think there's one park bench in it as a seat, but it's deliberately meant to be devoid of play equipment because of the need for this visual walkable link through the middle of the site. Now, not to forget, there are spaces on the other parcels. You've got to look at this development as a whole. You know, the 500 houses, the earlier phases built. So it's not an essential requirement that each little site that you get has a contributory open space. That's already being provided across the site. This particular one forms a landscaping function with a link through, and then with this little island of landscaping, I think it's outside plot 5. So there's a deliberate reason why there's no play space there, is to create a link through with the ends of the site that you can see on the screen.
Thank you. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. I just really wanted to make an observation, really. With regards to the building of the block, I do find it disappointing, I think is the word, that there's not more architectural features in it. It's a lot of brick with smallish windows, and I just feel, I know the developers here and perhaps officers will pass these on to other developers, can we not get something that's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, a bit of architectural design within the wall? I just find that disappointing.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. I'm sure that will be passed on. In fact, it has been because you're being live streamed. Councillor FD.
Thank you, Chairman. Just like to bring the committee's attention to 7.40 with the Essex Police. It says upon revision of the document, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs where we'd like to actually talk to the applicant to discuss security aspects, and it does ask for us to recommend that in a condition for this planning application to be achieve an SBD Gold Award to demonstrate to residents that the security has been considered and incorporated by design in the current approved and therefore proven effective standard. I'd like to make that as a condition on the planning, or if that's not already on there.
Thank you, Councillor FD. Mr. Stranks.
Sorry, Chair, I would advise it against that. When we consult these consultees, they sometimes have a blinkered view. The police would put security fences up and things everywhere because that's their remit. Okay, what you have to do is to blend what their requirements are with all the other things, creating what was until the last NPPF beautiful places and things like this. To get secure by design certification, you have to go right in at the beginning, okay, before it becomes a planning application, and the police are involved at every stage, and then they give you that certificate on conclusion of the build. Now you can cherry pick and take pieces where you can and improve it, and you'll see that they've done that here. But if you ask them to achieve secure by design, what you'll end up with is a development that is basically hostile, great for security, perfect for security, but it wouldn't be a very nice place to live. So what you, not to look and enjoy, might be safe, but so it's a very high bar if you're going to say, we want a condition for secure by design. The developer would have to basically start all over again, incorporating that at every stage. What this developer has done is try where they can to do that. And that's with the links that you saw before and the surveillance of the streets, etc., the way the buildings look outwards. They've done what they can. But I think for a consultee to come in and say, it would be great to have secure by design, yes, good for the police, but it wouldn't be such a pleasant place to live in. And so there's a balance that has to be struck between achieving a good layout and architecture and landscaping and access and everything else and SPD. You're presented with a blend as the best of what we could achieve. But it would be going a level too high to have a condition, something they have to then comply with, to say that you've got to achieve secure by design. Because I doubt many of the schemes that you see, unless they've been designed right from the word go for secure by design. Maybe there's a terrible crime rate area or something like that where they have to do that. This, I doubt, would achieve full secure by design once built because of the other compromises the developer has to make.
Thank you, Mr. Stranks. Before you come back, Mr. Councillor FD, this is a proportion of a larger site, so, and also it did say that they would welcome an opportunity to discuss. Yes.
Okay, and point I'd like to make is I've been on the previously developed parts of this site, and they're not, some parts of them are not the best. We did, when this was first put to council 2 or 3 years ago, when it first started, we actually had a policeman come to us and address the council and point out lighting and other security concerns he had, and a lot of them have come to pass. So I'm just very concerned about security in Rayleigh and people protecting their stuff and having proper lighting and making it a pleasant place to live. So if that's not something we can put on there, I'd like to see security strengthened. I don't know quite know how to do that, but maybe take advice.
Thank you, Councillor FD. It is actually something I've already brought up with the ward councillors in respect to that site.
Just quickly, Chairman, it was the insistence of compliance with secure by design which spooked me. All the merits of getting better lighting and things like that, yes, they're all highly desirable and sought after. But if members wanted this decision to secure by design, I think that would be near impossible given all the other things, the urban design criteria.
I think we need to look at the wording of what they're saying. They would like the opportunity to discuss, and then they go on to say that.
Chairs, if you look at condition 11, it just says about submission of details of lighting of the car parking areas. You know, that's just one aspect. So there are some things that we can do, and that's just one of them. But it's the full total secure by design which would be a problem.
Councillor FD.
Like I said, I'm quite happy to take your advice on that. So if we can strengthen a couple of things like lighting and stuff like that, maybe actually get them to talk to the police, or actually get the police to talk to the applicant. Sometimes that's not the applicant.
I think they say they welcome the opportunity too. So, yeah. Councillor Constable.
Maybe as an advisory.
I think again we're being live streamed, so they've taken it on board. Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just have a look at that plan again, please? The site plan. Can you indicate on there, I can see where the main road comes in, there's just one road for that site. Is there pedestrian access on and off that site? Could you indicate where they are, please?
I think, Chair, we're hoping there's what they call permeability. So we're trying to zoom in hard enough to see if there's gaps between sort of parking areas and things. I think there's one there that you can see next to the, there's one there, but that would only serve that end for the flats. I'm looking there where you are now, and then if you come across, there's not one because there's a green, then there's the access, there's another one up there. So the people on, say, bikes, pushchairs, things like that, they'd be able to come and go through the gaps in the buildings, but the vehicle access is controlled at one point for highway reasons. So that, you know, you get the main access in, and then like a tree, it all permeates down to lesser quality roads. So there's pedestrian permeability, but by design there isn't vehicle permeability. And if you go back to the previous thing about secure by design, the police actually like it this way because burglars can't drive in and drive out somewhere else. They come in the way they came, get seen, etc. So that's just another feature of how in some ways the developer is meeting SPD, but he can't achieve necessarily full compliance.
Thank you, Mr. Stranks. Councillor Constable.
Yep, I can see what you're saying there, but it doesn't actually show any recognised footpaths in and out. So it just means people walking through bits of what may be garden. And from that road that goes from right to left, there's no footpath there from the roads showing. So the footpath out from the site onto the road. Shouldn't that be a proper footpath out instead of walking across the grass, or will that be something that will be sorted out at a later design
Ca-
stage.
Councillor Constable, can I just ask Mr. Smith, do you have an answer to that? Could you come to the microphone, please?
Thank you, Chair. The strategic landscaping around the parcel is being implemented separately to the development of the parcel itself. So, councillors will be aware the drainage is already in, the suds basins are in. The public open space to the east and the west is the responsibility of the lead developer. So connections will be created off the ends of the roads in the future.
So we'll have pathways off to the end of the road.
Correct.
Councillor Constable. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Councillor Mrs. Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I have no wish to curtail the conversation on this parcel development. I am reasonably familiar with Wolseley Park and its different parcels of development. I just feel that I would like to recommend this planning application for approval because I don't see that it's markedly different to anything else that is in place on that estate, and I feel that it is fitting. There are green open spaces, and it's the footpaths in place are already well used by pedestrians and joggers and people with buggies you see very regularly. I would like the points already made during this discussion to be taken into account if possible, and then the considerations as in the report. I feel that this application is acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. 1 second, please. Thanks to Councillor Wilson. I'll just ask Councillor Knight to come in and then we'll go for that.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not objecting to the development at all. It's in keeping with the rest of the Wolseley Park. I use it quite often. I've got friends that live there. It's quite easy to navigate. But my only concern is with the amount of buildings is the lack of amenities like doctors and that. Is there any provision for doctors and extensions in schools or anything to accommodate all these people that are going to be there? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knight. 1 second, please, members.
Chair, this is a reserve matters application, which means it's the detailed half, or in this case, not half in terms of all matters like education contributions, medical facilities and stuff like that are dealt with at the outline stage. So they were granted some time ago, and then the follow-up as they build is what the buildings look like and the minutiae. I was just picking the brains of my colleague who dealt with the outline about whether there was particular medical provision. It was 10 years ago, so yeah, she went there. Yeah, do you know?
Did you want more detail than that, or?
Well, what I've heard is that there was a purpose-built medical centre built on Wolseley Park somewhere, but it's just laying empty, and I don't know whether that's true or not.
So, like Mike said, it's not a matter for the determination of this application tonight. And my recollection of the legal agreement relating to the outline consent is that certainly there was healthcare contribution and or land set aside for the delivery of something, some facility on site. I think that what's happened, and through that legal agreement, is that the NHS England have required a contribution rather than provision on site. But if you want further information on that, I can give you that after the committee. There were certainly requirements in the 106 to do with education contributions.
Thank you, Katie. We, Councillor Wilson has proposed for acceptance. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Knight. Yeah, Councillor Knight seconded it. Can we have a show of hands for those in favour of approval? That's unanimous. Thank you, members. That concludes our business. Thank you very much for your time. And a Merry Christmas to you all and a prosperous New Year, and I look forward to seeing you in January, if not before.